You know, when we try to picture a massive world-altering threat, our minds almost automatically jump to something cinematic.
Oh, definitely. Like an alien invasion or something.
Right. A meteor hurtling toward Earth, or a massive fault line giving way, or, yeah, an invading army, something loud.
Something with sirens.
Exactly, something visible and completely undeniable. We like our threats to have sirens attached to them, but today we are flipping that entire paradigm upside down. So welcome to the Deep Dive.
We are so thrilled to have you with us.
We really are, because today we are unpacking a truly fascinating piece of source material. We're looking at a sermon delivered on June 7th, 2026 by Pastor Jared Harper, and it's titled The Great Deception.
It's a heavy title.
It is. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how ancient, millennia-old biblical prophecy is currently being used to interpret some of the most cutting-edge technological and cultural shifts of our modern era.
Yeah, but before we get into the architecture of his argument, we really need to establish a very clear framework for you, the listener.
Good point, yeah.
Because the source material we are examining today is deeply religious, theological, and, inherently subjective. So our goal here is absolutely not to endorse, validate, or debate Pastor Harper's theological conclusions.
Right, we're not taking sides here.
Exactly. We are acting strictly as impartial guides. We just want to dive into his highly compelling psychological and cultural arguments to understand how certain communities are making sense of wild concepts like artificial intelligence, UFOs, and, the shifting landscape of modern spirituality.
Which brings us to Pastor Harper's provocative central claim. He says the greatest threat facing humanity isn't an alien invasion.
As much as Hollywood wants us to think that.
Right, and it isn't a sci-fi robot uprising either. The ultimate threat, according to him, is actually humanity's own relentless desire for knowledge without God.
It's a fascinating premise.
It really is. And to build that case, he doesn't start in the clouds with theology. He starts with the fundamental mechanics of human psychology. He opened this sermon by playing a true or false game with his congregation regarding artificial intelligence. Oh, I loved this part. It was so clever.
Yeah, he put 3 wild statements up on a screen. Statement A, an AI system passed a professional medical license exam. Statement B, a man used AI-generated evidence during a legal proceeding.
Yikes.
Right. And statement C, scientists successfully transmitted a human thought from one person's brain to another using a brain-computer interface.
And then he asked the room for a show of hands to spot the lie. And of course, people confidently raised their hands for whichever statement felt the most outrageous to them.
Naturally.
Then he dropped the twist. They are all entirely true.
Every single one.
Every single one of those mind-bending scenarios has already happened in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
The profound psychological observation he makes here is that nobody in that room raised their hand because they actively wanted to be wrong.
Uh-huh.
The human brain just doesn't choose a lie. The person being deceived cannot know they are being deceived. Otherwise, the deception instantly evaporates. Okay, let's unpack this. Because for a deception to be successful, it has to completely bypass our critical defenses and integrate itself into our reality.
That has to feel intrinsically true.
Exactly. It has to feel true. And Harper grounds this psychological reality in his biblical worldview by pointing out a very specific detail in the book of Matthew. When Jesus' disciples asked him about the end of the age, Jesus did not start his answer by warning them about cinematic disasters.
Right. He didn't lead with earthquakes or economic collapse or wars.
No, the very first warning out of his mouth in Matthew 24:4 was incredibly subtle. He simply said, "Watch out that no one deceives you."
That prioritization reveals so much about human vulnerability, I think, because earthquakes and wars are external forces, right? They are impossible to ignore, and they happen to you regardless of your input.
You can't just opt out of an earthquake.
Exactly. Deception, however, requires your active, albeit unknowing, participation. Harper delivers a really memorable distillation of this concept when he says that Satan, who is the primary adversary in this biblical framework, prefers persuasion over force because lies are easier to carry than chains.
Man, lies are easier to carry than chains. That is such a vivid image.
It really sticks with you.
It does. And if we think about how this plays out in the physical world, it reminds me of the difference between a house fire and a carbon monoxide leak.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Because a raging fire is your war, your earthquake. It's terrifying, it's hot, it consumes everything, and you know immediately that your only goal is to escape.
The threat is obvious.
Right. But deception operates like carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
It is deadly specifically because it is odorless, colorless, and entirely invisible. It doesn't trigger your panic response at all.
It just quietly puts you to sleep.
Exactly. You sit comfortably on your couch, convinced that everything in your living room is perfectly fine while it's actually killing you.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of the biblical narrative Harper is pulling from, that invisible carbon monoxide strategy has been the playbook from the very beginning.
Yeah, he takes it all the way back to Genesis.
He does. He takes the congregation all the way back to the Garden of Eden to look at the mechanics of the first deception. The serpent didn't show up with an invading army. There was no frontal assault on Adam and Eve.
Just a conversation.
Right. The strategy was merely a simple, probing question. Did God really say?
It's the introduction of an alternate explanation.
Precisely. The enemy didn't physically overpower humanity. He offered a slightly altered version of reality that appealed to their intellect and their desire for autonomy.
It was pitched as an upgrade.
Yes, a way to gain hidden knowledge. The psychological mechanism at play here is cognitive offloading. When we are presented with an alternate explanation that flatters our intelligence or, validates our desires, our brains are incredibly eager to adopt it and just discard the previous roles.
Which is wild. And knowing that the human mind is so profoundly susceptible to a well-packaged alternate explanation entirely changes how we view the mysteries dominating our current news cycles.
It really frames everything differently.
It does, because Harper takes this framework of the invisible threat and applies it directly to the sky. He points out a massive cultural shift regarding UFOs, or UAPs, as the government categorizes them now.
Why the rebranding?
Yeah, the rebranding. It used to be that talking about flying saucers relegated you to the absolute fringe of society. You were the person with the tinfoil hat.
Totally.
But today, we are watching verified government videos, we're listening to military pilot testimonies on primetime news, and witnessing literal congressional hearings about unexplained crafts defying our known laws of physics.
The phenomenon has gone completely mainstream. And this is where Harper introduces a highly controversial, yet internally consistent theological viewpoint.
This is where he really shakes things up.
He looks at this explosion of extraterrestrial phenomena and thoroughly rejects the popular scientific consensus. He does not believe these are advanced alien species visiting from another galaxy.
Wait, so what does he think they are?
He argues that what modern culture is calling aliens are actually fallen spiritual beings, demons masquerading as advanced intergalactic visitors.
Wow. That is a staggering paradigm shift.
It is. But he backs this up by analyzing a sociological trend that is honestly hard to deny. He notes that the modern world is actually incredibly eager to embrace supernatural concepts.
Oh, for sure.
If you walk into a coffee shop and talk about crystals, energy fields, manifesting spirit guides, or parallel dimensions, nobody blinks an eye.
It's totally normal conversation.
But the moment you profess a belief in the biblical God, you are suddenly viewed as the irrational one in the room. His observation here is striking. He says, the world is not becoming less spiritual. The world is becoming spiritual without God.
Spiritual without God. The sociology behind that is fascinating. Society is perfectly willing to accept the supernatural, provided that the supernatural force in question doesn't come with moral authority.
Or demand accountability.
Exactly. You can harness the energy of a crystal without having to change your character or your behavior. You can't do that with a creator God.
Harper leverages a brilliant critique of Hollywood to show how deeply this lack of accountability has been conditioned into our culture.
Oh, the movie analogy, yeah.
Right. Think about almost every major alien movie produced over the last 50 years. Extraterrestrials arrive to destroy us, enlighten us, or save us from ourselves. And the solution to the grand cosmic problem is always advanced technology, hidden cosmic wisdom, or forced human evolution.
It's never Jesus.
It is never Jesus. Culture has spent decades training us to look up at the stars for our salvation, rather than looking at Scripture.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though, and push back on behalf of you listening, because if a massive, undeniably supernatural event actually happened tomorrow, say, a shimmering craft touches down on the White House lawn.
Okay, picture it.
Would our first instinct as a modern, rational culture truly be to view it through a theological lens? Wouldn't our immediate hardwired reaction be to assume it's a sci-fi scenario playing out in real life? We would instinctively call the astrophysicists before we ever thought to call the theologians.
What's fascinating here is that Harper anticipates that exact secular scientific reaction.
Oh.
And he argues that the reaction itself is the successful culmination of the deception.
Really? The scientific reaction is the deception.
Yes, because if humanity immediately assumes the event is just advanced biology and physics, they have fully swallowed the alternate explanation. He grounds this in Ephesians 6:110, which states that the ultimate human struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against invisible spiritual rulers and authorities.
So the spiritual conflict is hidden behind the physical event.
In his view, there is a massive, unseen spiritual conflict actively orchestrating these visible earthly events, using our reliance on science as a blindfold.
So the scientific framework effectively serves as a cover story to keep people from recognizing the spiritual warfare taking place.
Exactly the point he is making. And he references 2 Corinthians 11:1, which warns that Satan masquerades as an angel of light.
Not a monster in the dark.
Right. Harper unpacks the psychology of that masquerade. Satan doesn't show up manifesting darkness, horror, or blatant evil because human instinct would immediately reject it. He appears as something enlightening, attractive, and intellectually advanced.
That makes total sense because successful deceptions are never marketed as regression.
Oh, never.
They're exclusively marketed as breakthroughs, as progress, and as the inevitable next step in human evolution.
And here's where it gets really interesting. He takes this concept of an angel of light, promising a technological breakthrough, and he brings it down from the theoretical skies and places it right into the glowing screens in our pockets.
Oh yeah, the AI discussion.
We are currently living through an absolute explosion of artificial intelligence. We have machines that can write comprehensive books, generate photorealistic video out of thin air, and perfectly mimic the voices of our loved ones.
It's everywhere now. And Harper makes a chilling connection here to a very specific and historically confusing prophecy in the book of Revelation.
Revelation 13:15.
Yes, where it describes a second beast that is given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that the image could speak.
Which is wild.
For 2 millennia, theologians and scholars read that verse and struggled to conceptualize it. I mean, a statue that can talk and influence a global system of commerce and control. It sounded like pure mythology or dark magic.
But Harper argues that for the first time in human history, we no longer have to rely on the concept of magic to understand the mechanics of that verse.
Right, because we have it.
We have talking digital avatars, we have deepfakes, we have entirely synthetic realities built on code and electricity. The literal technological infrastructure required for a speaking image that commands human attention and dictates truth is currently being beta tested on our smartphones.
We have to look at the phenomenon of anthropomorphism here too. That human tendency to project human traits, emotions, and intentions onto non-human entities.
It's hardwired into us.
Exactly. Our brains evolved to recognize faces, voices, and conversational patterns as indicators of a soul. When an AI chatbot uses the word I, or says I'm sorry, our neurological empathy centers light up as if a real person just apologized to us.
It's a complete cognitive bypass.
That cognitive bypass is why Harper points out the dark comedy of our current moment. We've reached a stage where people will get into a legitimate, heated argument with a computer program, lose the argument, and then genuinely type out an apology to the machine.
I've definitely said please and thank you to my AI assistant.
We all have. We are projecting authority onto our own creations. But, you know, Harper is careful to add some vital nuance, so this doesn't just evolve into a rant against silicon chips. He doesn't go full Luddite.
No. And there's a fantastic unscripted moment in the source material where right in the middle of this intense warning about the dangers of technology, Harper's own cell phone starts ringing loudly on the pulpit.
That was hilarious.
It's perfect comedic timing. And he uses that exact moment to prove his point. He tells the congregation that the microphones, the stage lights, the live streams, and the cell phones are purely tools. Technology itself is morally neutral, code and hardware.
Right. The true danger he is warning against is what he terms the spirit of Babel, pulling from the story of the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11.
The bricks weren't the problem.
Exactly. The biblical condemnation of Babel wasn't about the invention of bricks and mortar. The issue was humanity's internal motivation. They were trying to build a tower to reach heaven, to make a name for themselves, and to engineer their own divine status without God. It was the ultimate pursuit of technological self-sufficiency.
And when you view it through the lens of Babel, asking a machine learning algorithm for moral guidance or spiritual comfort is such a bizarre concept.
It's a lot like using a pocket calculator to write a heartfelt love poem.
That is a perfect analogy.
Sure, you can press the buttons, and it will eventually generate a numerical output, but it fundamentally lacks the soul, the empathy, and the divine spark required to actually comprehend the task. It is an empty, sterile imitation of wisdom.
And that realization is where the final puzzle pieces connect for Harper's congregation. The ultimate subtle deception of our modern age isn't a grand, militant, Richard Dawkins-style campaign to convince the masses that God doesn't exist. Way too obvious. That frontal assault creates too much cultural friction. The deception is far more elegant. It's merely convincing people that they don't need God anymore. If you have infinite culture, infinite information, and artificial intelligence that you trust to solve your problems, well, the concept of a creator simply becomes obsolete.
So what does this all mean? Every magic trick, every alternate explanation, and every sophisticated deception ultimately has an end goal.
There's always a payoff.
Right. What is the grand objective of this massive interlocking web of artificial intelligence, shifting cultural narratives, and supernatural UFO phenomena? What does this unseen force actually want from humanity?
According to Pastor Harper's worldview, the goal is, and always has been, worship. The entire invisible conflict is a battle for human allegiance.
Worship.
Yes. He directs his audience to Luke chapter 4, the account of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness. Satan offers Jesus dominion over all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for one specific thing.
And it wasn't a change in belief.
Exactly. The enemy doesn't ask Jesus to become an atheist. He doesn't demand that Jesus stop performing miracles or healing people. He simply asks for worship. The ultimate prize in this cosmic war is devotion.
Worship. Not our physical destruction, but the capture of our attention and our allegiance. So if the threat is invisible, and the ultimate goal is our devotion, how are you supposed to protect yourself?
That's the big question.
Harper's antidote is surprisingly simple. He says the answer isn't becoming a paranoid conspiracy theorist who spends 14 hours a day in a dark room trying to debunk every internet rabbit hole.
Thank goodness.
Right. The antidote is intimately knowing the shepherd's voice. And he shares this incredibly relatable childhood story to drive the point home. He talks about being a young kid and getting lost in a massive crowded department store like a TJ Maxx.
Oh, I've been there. The sudden visceral panic of realizing every aisle looks exactly the same.
And the sheer volume of noise in the building is overwhelming. But rather than running around screaming in a panic, Harper says he would just stop walking and listen. He knew his dad had this very specific, distinct way of coughing.
Oh, that's really sweet.
And his mom had a particular, quiet way of sniffing. Because he knew their voices and their subtle sounds so intimately, he could mentally filter out all the overhead muzak, all the cash register beeps, and all the chaotic chatter of the crowd, and walk straight toward them.
You didn't need a map.
He didn't need to memorize the store's massive blueprint to survive. He just needed to recognize his father's voice amidst the noise.
It's a beautiful, grounded illustration of spiritual discernment. And he pairs that with another analogy about pre-GPS paper maps, reminding the audience of what it was like to take a wrong turn on a long highway back in the day.
Oh man, before the blue dot told you where you were?
Exactly. You could drive for 50 miles in the entirely wrong direction, and the whole time the experience felt perfectly reasonable. The road is smooth, the car is running fine, the scenery is beautiful, and you feel entirely confident in your navigation.
You don't realize you are completely lost until much, much later when you finally check the map.
Deception feels like progress right up until the moment of disaster.
So what does this all mean for you as you navigate your own daily information diet? Harper is offering a framework of profound peace in an era defined by overwhelming technological anxiety. He's telling his listeners that they don't need a PhD in artificial intelligence, and they don't need a top-secret security clearance at the Pentagon to understand UFOs in order to be spiritually safe.
His pastoral advice is to anchor yourself deeply in an unchanging, stable truth, rather than trying to surf the constantly shifting, unpredictable waves of cultural feelings and technological breakthroughs.
Which is exhausting to try and keep up with anyway.
It really is. And he concludes with a very blunt, sobering warning to those attempting to stay neutral in this environment. He talks about people sitting on the fence, those who aren't explicitly choosing a relationship with God, but firmly believe they aren't actively choosing evil either.
The conscientious objectors.
Right, the ones who just want to opt out of the spiritual conflict entirely and live a good life.
His quote here is a total gut punch. He says, "Satan owns the fence."
Wow.
Meaning, in a binary battle for human allegiance, deciding to make no decision is making a decision. You cannot be a neutral party in a spiritual war.
This raises an important question about modern human nature, too. We deeply cherish the illusion of our own neutrality. We love to believe we are purely objective, rational observers of our culture, untouched by the algorithms.
But we aren't.
No. Harper is challenging that assumption at its core. He's arguing that every piece of technology we rely on, every media narrative we consume, and every celestial mystery we try to solve is actively pulling our attention and therefore our allegiance in one direction or another.
In a system designed to extract your devotion, passivity is just another form of compliance.
It fundamentally reframes how you look at the evening news, or even the apps on your phone.
It really does. To summarize this incredible journey we've been on today, we have stepped into a worldview where a new language learning AI isn't just a string of Python code, and a verified military UFO video isn't just an unexplained atmospheric anomaly.
Through the lens of Pastor Harper's sermon, these are all active, moving pieces in an ancient, invisible battle for the ultimate prize.
Human worship and allegiance. It's a perspective that takes the digital conveniences we casually scroll past every single day and infuses them with profound, almost terrifying spiritual weight.
It demands that we look past the shiny, user-friendly surface of our societal progress and ask incredibly hard questions about what we are actually putting our ultimate trust in. Are we seeking functional tools to better our lives, or are we quietly seeking technological saviors to bypass our need for a creator?
And that leads us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you go back to your screens, your routines, and your daily life. We started this deep dive by talking about deception acting exactly like a carbon monoxide leak, an invisible threat that perfectly mimics the safety of your own home.
Right.
As we hurtle toward a rapidly approaching future where artificial intelligence can perfectly synthesize the voice, the face, and even the nuanced writing style of our most trusted loved ones and our most revered spiritual leaders, how will the next generation learn to tell the difference between a genuine crisis of faith and a localized glitch in the code?
If the shepherd's voice itself can be flawlessly deepfaked by an algorithm, what remains to anchor us to the truth?
That might just be the defining technological and theological question of the next decade.
It truly is.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a brand new lens to view the world through, or at the very least, a fascinating new framework to think about the next time you ask a chatbot for advice. Until next time, stay curious.